Have you forgotten about GMOs? Don't feel bad. I forgot to talk about it because I don't eat genetically modified food because I buy organic. So it's kind of out of my range of focus, so to speak, but something just happened that brought it back up, and I feel it's deserving of a warning. And I personally feel that genetically modified food is one of the worst things you could ever do. And I know there's tons of science, all by the companies that make it, that say it's perfectly safe. And then there's tons of science, all by the people that hate it, that say it's pretty disruptive. And so I kind of go with that science because it just doesn't make any sense. And there's too many common sense or natural occurrences that are happening around it that lead me to believe that it's disrupting your digestive system and causing a host of health problems. A lot of documentaries have come out stating that farmers who had livestock that were really sick switched from GMO grain to non-GMO grain, and their animals all went back to their normal state of health within 30 days. Now, that's quite a statement, to notice that your entire herd was sick and then they became better just by switching the type of grain. You know, not switching from what the grain actually was, but just switching to non-GMO. So a GMO, just so you're aware of what that is, it's genetically modified. And the main problem with it, in my opinion, is that they stick a toxin in it, which is a natural type of bacteria they discovered, which functions as a pesticide. And they discovered this. It's called Bt toxin. They discovered it because they noticed around their plant where they were making Roundup pesticide that a lot of the weeds developed this bacteria and became resistant to Roundup. So they put it actually inside the grain. And it makes the grain resistant to Roundup. So the theory was you get less pesticides because the plant is, you know, it has this particle that helps it adapt to its environment. Roundup, you need less of it to kill weeds, and so the theory was you need less pesticides. It's never actually proven out. They do know now after 10 years, weeds become resistant to it, and now you actually need more pesticides and more herbicides than you needed before. So besides the fact that when you buy a GMO food, you can be pretty much guaranteed it's sprayed with more pesticides than the regular food. So that right away should be a major flag for you. Now, what brought this up? What brought GMOs back into my focus, so to speak? Well, I had a client who loves to take Tianchi, and she developed a digestive issue, and she could no longer use it. So every time she took it, she got a little bit off in her digestion. She started to notice that her digestion was messed up a lot. And so anything that she introduced into her body that was rich, just like Tianchi is a rich anti-stress brain drink, it upset her stomach. And it really disappointed her because when she used to take it, she loved it. So she started experimenting with her own diet. And this person eats a pretty clean diet. She's experimented with paleo and different things. And she discovered on her own that it was eggs that made her sick. But the interesting thing was that she discovered by changing her eggs and experimenting with it that organically grown eggs and pasture-raised eggs had no ill effect on her digestive system. And when she ate those eggs, she could take Tianchi and she felt fantastic. So then she experimented and went to a restaurant and had eggs, got sick again, bought eggs that were, contained GMO food. This is what happens with normal grocery store eggs, by the way, and the eggs you get in a restaurant, unless they're organic, is that the chickens are eating GMO feed. And so not only does that feed have more pesticides in it, which then is absorbed into the fat, which an egg is mostly fat, and transferred to you, but it has this GMO toxin in it, which they'll argue with you that it doesn't, but that argument doesn't make any sense either. So she noticed when she ate those eggs, she got sick, couldn't take Tianchi. But now she's figured out, and she's proved to herself, because this is all she eats now, organic eggs or pasture raised, which by law cannot contain any GMOs. The chickens cannot be fed GMO grain. She feels fantastic, and she can go back to drinking her favorite drink, which is Tianchi. So this leads me to look at all the research on GMO foods. And believe me, even the Egg Board has got involved and said there's no transference of GMO toxin, genetically modified material, into the egg, so that you have no worries. The eggs are completely the same as any other egg. Well, that's fascinating. They're claiming that the chicken's magical digestive system does away with this process completely and doesn't pass any of it on. And yet, if you read other research, there's a great research paper came out of Ohio State University where they showed that by changing the feed, in this case soy, to a high isoflavone type of soy, they can influence the amount of soy isoflavones found in the egg yolk. Wow. Now that means the chicken's digestive system is so magical that it can differentiate between soy isoflavones, which might be beneficial for you, and Bt toxin, or genetically modified material, that might not be good for you, and destroy one of them and leave the other one in. That's a pretty smart chicken. That's an amazing digestive system. So here's my problem with that whole issue, and the whole issue with Bt toxin is that it's a bacteria, which is basically what your whole digestive system is based on. Good bacteria digesting and breaking down your food, creating novel things that are good for your immune system and good for your entire body. In fact, you create a lot of your brain chemicals in your digestive system. So now you're introducing a type of bacteria that's designed to kill bugs and to actually help with insect control and weed control. It's a type of natural pesticide into your digestive system. Now, what do you think that's going to actually do? Do you think it's beneficial? And this is my whole take and whole reason why I avoid GMO food. One, because of the Bt toxin. One, I don't think they've ever tested it on humans. They're running that test right now for the last 30 years in the United States just by letting you eat it. And they're not paying attention to the data which shows in the last 30 years, all chronic disease has just gone off the charts in this country. Look at the amount of autoimmune disease, 50 million people now in this country, which has caused a lot of the root causes of autoimmune is traced back to poor digestion, leaving undigested food particles into your bloodstream and your immune system reacting to it. Now, Bt toxin just happens to be something that disrupts your digestive system. So there might be a correlation there. So what I'm trying to say is I avoid it completely. I have a problem with putting some sort of natural toxin, a pesticide that's in food, into my stomach. And I have a problem with eating a food that requires more pesticides than any other food. And if you think that I'm exaggerating on that, I remember a study done in Europe about 3 years ago, because I used to reference this in my talks when I was traveling around Europe giving lectures. And they tested around 800 people in Europe, and they picked them all from cities. They didn't live on farms. They were in cities and occupations that had nothing to do with agriculture. And they tested them for glycophosphate content. Glycophosphate is another term for Roundup pesticide. And Europe, by the way, has very stringent restrictions on the amount of that you can actually use, and restrictions on GMO food. And they found that almost every single person in the study had glycophosphate in their urine. Think about that. It's so prevalent, it's so widespread through the food supply that even people that didn't live or in an agricultural area or work in an agricultural job and was living in a country that limits the amount of glycophosphate, they all had it in their urine, which just tells you how prevalent this is. And it's been connected to cancer and a host of other chronic diseases. So avoid GMO, buy organic. There's never been a better time to get high quality organic at good prices. If you're like me, I'm a bargain shopper. I find great organic produce and food all the time that's barely any more cost than regular produce. So avoid GMO. That's my take today.